Hold on.
Meeting is being live streamed.
Yep, I'm still setting up on my end. Hang tight 1 second. Okay. You guys got feedback from me?
I've got the live signal up in the corner there.
Oh, as do I.
Same time doing this, so we're just gonna have to figure that part out. So welcome to everyone who is on live. My name is Sandra Santa-Buckles. I am at Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center. Our goal is to make sure that people in Maryland and people in need know that we exist and some of our partners exist to help you. We provide free legal services to any victims of crime in the state of Maryland. And this month we are talking about domestic violence. It's Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And so let's just hop right to it. With me today are Kurt Wolfgang, the Executive Director of Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center. One of our board members, Latoya Francis Williams. Oops, I spelled your name wrong. And Lisa Sloyer from Turnaround Inc. I will let them introduce themselves and then we'll move into some questions. Kurt?
Hi, I'm Kurt Wolfgang, the Executive Director of the Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center. I am an attorney for more than 35 years and had a lot of things to do with domestic violence over the years and domestic violence cases.
And good afternoon, all. My name is Latoya Francis Williams. Like Kirk, I am also an attorney by trade, and I sit on the board of directors for the Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center. And that was a bit of an interesting note. In the litigation world, most people don't think it's a good marry, but it is. I do criminal defense work, and of course, the civil world, I do plaintiffs work. And so my role in, I call it the victims' rights world, is to make sure that all voices are heard, be it a criminal defense attorney or on the side of a plaintiff as a victim of crime. And in this case, of course, I've had many cases dealing with domestic violence, and hopefully we'll get into some of my concerns where our men, our brothers in our communities simply do not ask for help when they need to be asking for help. So thank you all for having me.
Thanks, Latoya. And Lisa.
Yes, my name is Lisa Sloyer, and I am the program manager for the Advocacy and Resources program at Turnaround. We serve both Baltimore County and Baltimore City for survivors of intimate partner violence, sexual violence, and human trafficking.
Thanks, Lisa. So just to let you guys at home know what's going on, Lisa and I are not attorneys. So what we want to do is bring information to people that need it and make sure that it's understandable for everyone, because I think that that's the scary part, right? Is something happens to you, violence is occurring, crimes are happening, and it's just so confusing for those of us out here. For me, I'm married to a police officer. He's been a police officer for over 30 years at this point, so not quite an attorney, although a different angle on things. And so anywho, so we are getting into domestic violence, and I guess the good place to start is something's happening to you and you want to report it, or there's a lot of things going on where people don't leave their abuser because of one reason or the other. Some of them are financial, some of them are you don't know where you're going to go, the manipulation, all those things that are going on. You finally make the move and you're like, okay, this is enough is enough. And then we go to a resource like Turnaround, right? So Lisa, what are some of the things that your organization does to help someone out of these really dire situations?
So it's really, we start where the client is, right? So if somebody presents to us and they're in need of shelter, we can provide shelter. All of my advocates have the ability to provide court accompaniment. While we are not attorneys, we are there to kind of help them navigate the system, right? So if that is during court hours, going to the actual courthouse to file for a temporary protective order all the way to the final protective order, and then coaching folks after hours that if they need to file for a temporary protective order to seek out the commissioner's office.
Perfect. So it's like a first stop, and you guys have emergency services. So some of the things that we've done in the past, our organizations have done, is you guys have like emergency shelter in hotels, Uber, like lifts out of, just to get out if you need to. Resources are available, and Turnaround takes care of Baltimore County and Baltimore City, but they do refer out to other similar organizations that can help, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a jurisdiction with Turnaround is not an issue, right? So like if somebody's coming to us for help, we are going to make sure that they get the help they need, regardless of jurisdiction. And if that means providing a warm handoff to one of our partnering agencies in another jurisdiction, we make sure to make that happen, making sure that they are connected with the same level of service that they would receive with us here at Turnaround.
Great. So we've got a couple watchers. Oh, Clyde Boatwright is he was with us last time, and Sharon DiMaggio. So that's fantastic. So, okay, that's awesome. Thank you so much for providing that, and love that, all these organizations that
Oh, I think Sandra has frozen. So Sandra, I think you
I'm
frozen.
do the same work. I'm frozen.
Now
Oh,
you're back.
You're back.
Okay.
Okay.
So let's dive into what happens if the police don't believe me.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there's definitely I'll defer to Latoya. But we definitely go ahead.
No, I'll defer to you. My vantage point is that of an attorney. So I suppose it is appropriate to first stop. What if the police don't believe me? Sometimes, many times, the first contact isn't necessarily with law enforcement. So if you would please, and then I'll dovetail off of what you have to contribute.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely do a lot of advocacy work with law enforcement, providing, even technical support to provide insight as to not only just the stories that people come to us with, but providing extra context and advocacy. I think that that's really where my department comes in, is that we provide space and we hold space for survivors, but we also are their voice when their voices are not being heard. So that's really, I will defer to Latoya now.
So my thought on that is, when we first we're batting around what to talk about when it comes to dealing with domestic violence in this month, and as we should all concern ourselves with every month, is a problem that I believe I come across more often than not. What if law enforcement, what if the police don't believe me? And I'm so glad, Lisa, that you had mentioned that you all at least serve as an advocate. But this is what I say to the community. One, if you are a victim of crime, and in this instance, we're talking about domestic violence, you have options in terms of getting protection, whether you are going down the civil route or the quote criminal route. And the reason I say that is because our system, we live in a state that is liberal enough to offer more than one avenue when it comes to getting help, meaning getting out of your situation. So what if the police don't believe you? Here are my thoughts. When it comes to the quote criminal route, Maryland is one of the few states in this country that allows you to begin the criminal quote prosecution process as a civilian. You can go to a commissioner, you can go to the courts, depending on whether the court is open. If the court is not open for the day, you can go to the commissioner and tell your story. A commissioner will hear your story based on the document. You'll complete a petition for protection and will determine whether or not you are eligible. And essentially a judge will hear, after you get the initial request, the order for protection, a judge will hear whether you're entitled to relief. If law enforcement doesn't believe you, you still have your own voice, and it takes a lot of strength to step up and say what it is that you're feeling, what you've gone through. Sometimes people feel like they don't have the right words to use, but if
All
in
right.
fact you go to a commissioner and you say, I need more than just, can you hear me?
Mhm.
Yes.
I need more than just civil protection. Many times the commissioner will also offer you an application for criminal charges. So you have the civil route and the criminal route, and they can run parallel. Now, from the criminal defense attorney standpoint, many times I know my clients feel like this is unfair. Someone just said something about me and I didn't do that, or it didn't happen like that. But our system is designed in these urgent situations to give the complainant a level of protection. So if law enforcement doesn't believe you, you at least get the ball rolling and you can hit the ground running by actually saying something on your behalf. If you have to bring a loved one with you to court, if you have to bring documentation to court, that's fine. The system, the roles, be it civil or criminal, begin with just your word. And so while it's nice to have law enforcement, quote, believe you, because that's an issue, that is not the make or break of you getting a level of protection. In fact, if law enforcement is not present, many times the court will take the testimony of law enforcement for what it is and give it the weight that it deserves. Law enforcement may be trained to observe conduct, injuries, and quickly retain information, but it doesn't mean if you're not showing visible injuries of, quote, bruising or objective injuries, it doesn't mean you were not attacked. It doesn't mean you were not, quote, abused. So if law enforcement doesn't believe you, you still must take the necessary steps to get the levels of protection, at least that our system provides, beginning at the gate, meaning either civil or criminal. The law in Maryland allows you to use your voice as the first point of advocacy, if it's for yourself, if it's for a vulnerable adult, if it's for a child, if it's for a neighbor, if you're a witness, the law allows you to use your voice to at least begin the process. So my initial response, though it's long, is if law enforcement doesn't believe you, don't despair, right? Don't give up. Go to the commissioner and tell your story. I guess the next step is, what if the judge doesn't believe you? But I know at the outset of this discussion, I really wanted the community to understand that our system is designed for the urgency. Now, I'll kind of end this portion of my statement with this. If you all think about what we went through during COVID and the shutdown, remember what our appellate court said. We're still going to carry on when it comes to protective orders, peace orders, right? The state as a whole decided, even though our system is shut down, and as a defense attorney, I've had homicide cases, but rape cases where my clients are the accused, and they'd been waiting for trial for years. That, nevertheless, was not given priority over someone that could come to the court and say, I need protection right now. So just understand that your voice is very powerful and your voice means something. By design, our system is set up to hear you and to hear you speak out. So if law enforcement doesn't believe you, do not despair, begin the process. And of course, an attorney, an advocate, the court, a witness can certainly assist you as you move forward. So
I
that
think
was my
that's
kind of short response.
That's a so that's a great point. I mean, it really does allow you to just go in and file, and if you feel no one has to believe you, like you really can take the first few steps on your own. No, your parents, no one has to be by your side. If you find an organization because you feel that you need the support, then that's great, because like Lisa said, they'll accompany you and they can walk you through the steps. So even if you feel like you're not being supported in your claims, part of abusers is that they isolate, right? So maybe we moved to Maryland because that's where his family's from. And then lo and behold, something happens to you and you're all alone and you don't know anybody. Well, you don't need to, because, we'll immediately wrap you up, and the organizations that are involved are so involved from their hearts. So it's a great point, I think, that you brought up, and then from there, courts happen. one of the big things, Kurt, was there anything that you wanted to add?
Sure, that was extraordinarily well put. I'm glad we had you here, Latoya. In addition to that, I think that we use some terms, both Lisa and Latoya use some terms that need a little elaborating, and that is when we talk about you going in there on your own to the commissioner, we'll go with you to the commissioner, and I think Turnaround will go with you as well, and we will help you ensure that what you write down in your statement is what you need to get across to the commissioner in order to make things happen. In addition to that, I think, while we're talking about what happens in the process, let's not forget what would be best for you to do from square one. And that is, if something's going on, call the police. If you're not able to call the police during the process, or you decide to do something later, you can still call the police. But if there are things that need to be recorded, some of this you're going to have to be a little bit self-help. Get your camera, take pictures. If there is damage done, if there are wounds or bruises on you, take pictures. If there is torn clothing or the house is damaged, something in the house is damaged, take pictures. If it's not inappropriate at the time, obviously your first concern is protecting yourself, but if you can grab your camera, grab your phone and videotape things, or turn on your video and just let it set so that it is recording.
That's
So
such a great point, Kurt, such a great point. And I mean, who would have ever thought we'd have these little tiny computers in our pockets, when we were kids and they told us not to use calculators on tests. I'm just saying. So that totally brings me to my number 2, because many of us were glued to the Johnny Depp trials this summer. I was working and I was listening and, taking those pictures. There were so many points of evidence in that case. And that opens another door where it comes to male victims of domestic violence. I think it's I did a post for Maryland Crime Victims social media. It was on Johnny Depp. I am a huge Johnny Depp fan, and I'm not saying that both were innocent. I'm not saying anything, but I thought it was super interesting that it was a male that was coming out saying, hey, this is what's happening to me and this is not okay. And after I posted that, there were several organizations that deal with male victims of domestic violence that were heartbreaking stories where men are often silenced because they want to be this masculine view. They don't want people to think that they're not, this alpha male, or they don't, there's just such a stigma to it. So let's talk about that for a second. Are the same resources available for males? What about court? What about, how that looks and what you guys have experienced? And I'm going to start with Lisa.
Yeah, so we do not discriminate based on gender. We understand violence happens regardless of how someone identifies, right? I think the conversation comes, to the point where we really try to provide a lot of community education, because this goes to the root of how we socialize our children, and understanding, things like boundaries and consent, and what is okay for you, and what is not okay, right? No one has access to your body unless you give them consent to do so, right? So speaking up against these things, especially upholding, maybe some non-traditional roles of the quote unquote masculine socialization of children. So making sure that we're providing that support and that community education piece.
Thanks, Lisa. I mean, and I think it's interesting that you're talking about these like stereotypical concepts of masculinity versus us empowering females, right? So it's such an anomaly because it's like, you know, we want to make sure that our females are empowered, but then sometimes like, okay, you've got it, but also, you know, there is that line on both ends as far as like, you know, who, what, where, you know, how, and all the things that are going on. Latoya, what has been your experience with domestic violence when it comes to a male victim?
Unfortunately, I certainly have to echo Lisa that while the same resources are available to male victims, or at least persons that even identify themselves as males, I find culturally our society has conditioned men into simply just taking it. And unfortunately, after they stop taking it, when they finally do speak up, they almost minimize the history of abuse, if there has been a history of abuse, for example. I've had many clients, and I mean, I usually get them at the extreme, meaning they're criminally charged for defending themselves, or they're criminally charged when they finally, quote, hit back. And I don't say hit back literally, but they respond. And many times, even when they are charged, and even when we have evidence that in fact it's the man that's been suffering the abuse in this instance, and of course the times in past, I find it very difficult to convince sometimes the judiciary that, quote, he didn't do it. And so even at the very beginning stages of when someone takes advantage of the resources available that should be available to the man, which it is, but he finds himself on the wrong end of the criminal justice system, I find our society has conditioned even our courts, even the judiciary, even the attorneys, that, sir, you know, if you didn't say anything before, it very likely didn't happen, or it didn't happen that way. So I implore our men, and I implore, well, let's start with the women, okay, that are raising our men, to explain to them that they don't have to accept abuse. We always tell our boys, don't hit girls, and then we tell our girls, sometimes hit back. Very rarely do we find ourselves telling our girls, well, also don't hit boys, right? And don't allow the boy to get hit. But, you know, other than telling a young man, don't strike someone, don't abuse someone, don't stalk them, don't harass them, we also need to be teaching them that they are human beings also, entitled to dignity and respect. And they are not anyone's battering ram, and they're not anyone's footstool. And at the first indication of violence, whether it be household violence, whether it's from a stranger, whether it's from an intimate partner, at the first incident, that must be reported. Now, I say that to say this: it is easier said than done, because after generations of conditioning men that they are strong, that if something happened, maybe they deserved it. Many times we find ourselves, especially dealing with marginalized people like maybe Black men or persons that speak English as a second language, they're afraid that they would, quote, tear their household apart if they do say something. So many times the collateral fallout is so big that they won't say anything if in fact they're subjected to abuse. But I say to the victims of domestic violence, if you don't say anything, the court literally will have nothing. If we're going to the courts, if you go into the police, they will have nothing to go off of. They will have nothing to support your story, and they really won't have much to work with to stop the abuse. And that's the goal. The goal certainly isn't to just simply tell to be telling. The goal is to stop a pattern, or to stop the abuse to yourself or to anyone around you, whether it be in front of or not in front of family, friends, enemies, children, but to the men, you have to say something. And to the women, you have to stop abusing. We find it is more common than not that men suffer and deal with sexual, physical, emotional abuse from their partner if it's happened once before and no one has done anything to come to the man's aid. So, you know, yeah, I'm long-winded and I'll wrap it up right now. But I submit that, you know, while the task feels daunting, it is a very, very, very sad scenario where you have a man that is abused and has accepted the abuse. When I say accepted, meaning they've never reached out for help. I don't mean they deserve it or they want it. I mean, they've never reached out for help, particularly outside of the home, outside of the unit. We find that that cycle doesn't end. And I'll kind of conclude with this. just a week and a half ago, I got a call from a client that's incarcerated in Baltimore County, and he didn't have to tell me what happened. I already knew what happened. He tried to break up with his significant other in July. And in July, she called the police, advised that he had struck her and they had a big fight. Long story short, when we got to court, she finally conceded that, all right, the story may have been a little different, that she in fact choked him, dragged him, scratched him, and it was on video. So while the charges were dropped, I said to him, you've got to truly leave her. And it's not easy and it's not safe. Well, I got a call from Baltimore County Detention Center. In fact, he was arrested yet again. Same woman, only this time she had someone shoot at him, missed him, struck his vehicle, and he got away. In response to that, he called Baltimore County from his safe location. And when he told his story, they said, sir, you have a warrant for your arrest. She gave the same story, and literally this is a pending case right now, so I can't give anyone's name, but my point is this man has been dealing with abuse from this woman for so long, and she feels almost emboldened by the system that has not taken her to the carpet, but he has not done his due diligence to say something about it. Prayerfully and thankfully, I got a great judge that was willing to listen, and I had a whole trial at a bail review, if you will, about what happened in the city, and he's been released pre-trial. But the point is this, men, if you do not say something, it can and very likely will escalate. So resources are the same for both, but you've got to take the first steps and actually reach out for the help so you can actually get it.
So let me add to that, because one of the points that LaToya made was that there is systemically a difficulty in believing that men are abused, and that you may find yourself less believed by the court system. All the more reason to gather evidence, all the more reason to take pictures, all the more reason to gather what evidence you can yourself, because if you call the police and the police get there in time, they can gather evidence. That's true, but you still need to watch out yourself for it in any number of different scenarios where the police evidence is not going to be available to you. They weren't there in time, whatever. You have to take pictures, show the injuries. If you are injured significantly enough, get to the hospital and let them document your injuries. If there is a sexual component to this, it becomes very important to have a trauma examination that may include a rape test kit, and there is a fuse on that, a time limit, and that hard and fast, very important time limit is within 72 hours. And maybe it is worth saying also that if you are in that circumstance, you do not clean yourself up, you do not shower, you go right to the emergency room of a major hospital, and they will do a trauma examination for you. And they have professionals who are trained specifically to do these trauma examinations. They are aware that you are in a vulnerable position, and they treat you very well.
Thanks, Kurt. Sorry, I'm having issues with this internet here at the office. Keeps kicking me off, so I apologize for any lag that is going on, especially with such a important topic. And I definitely appreciate all that. I mean, it definitely reminds me of a personal friend that my husband and I had, and he was actually being abused by his wife. He was a police officer. He would wake up to her hitting him, and he would try to contain her because he would wake up like, what the heck? And he would grab her, and because she was fighting, like, she would get bruises on her. And then as soon as the police would come, they would see the bruises on her arms. And it was a messy situation. So, I mean, I definitely appreciate the stories. And I think that, you know, it's so tough because men are significantly stronger than females just in general. It's like any type of, you know, movement that they make to try to maybe stop any attacks or something can definitely be seen in the wrong light. And so it's so important, like Kurt said, to make sure that, you know, any type of documentation that you can provide is definitely helpful. So I guess, you know, my big question coming into this, so again, not an attorney, so this is definitely focused more for you guys, for Kurt and LaToya, is criminal versus civil. I really don't understand. Okay, so here's how I've been broaching this question, knowing that I was going to ask this. This is like my main question for this entire thing is, I can go and punch Kurt in the face one day, and that would be criminal. But if I go and I punch my husband, then that's civil. And I feel like that's how it is seen to us regular old folk. Okay, just us regular old folk that don't know any difference. Because I think as civil, I think of civil divorce, adoption, you know, those child support, like those kinds of things. And I feel like I don't understand why there's a difference when it comes to abuse. I really don't understand why it would ever be considered civil versus criminal if someone puts hands on you. Can you guys help me and our viewers understand what the difference is and why you want to go one versus the other?
Let me leverage my white hair for this one here, because I'm actually old enough that I remember a time when there was no such thing as a domestic violence protective order. That was something that was done by statute many years ago. And there was available that you could go into court civilly and try to stop someone from behaving in such a fashion. But it was not as easy as it is today because of the statute and the way the statute works. So yes, I mean, it's also a cultural thing that when it's certainly within a family unit, people think of it as being domestic and civil. It's not. If someone is abusing you, it is a crime to do. And the courts and I think the public are coming around to that more and more. And it doesn't necessarily mean that there has to be any sort of great injury for it to be a crime as well. So the answer is it's almost always both civil and criminal. Now, you know, something like mental abuse may be a different story, that's more along the lines of civil than criminal. But if there's physical abuse, it's criminal and civil, and should be treated that way. Now, you may have your own reasons why you don't want to pursue a criminal matter, but that is, now you're into an area where you really ought to be consulting with an attorney as to what you need, what direction you need to go. And I mean, I have to say, I've been around doing this for 40 years. I'm extraordinarily impressed with turnaround. So if you're in Baltimore City or Baltimore County, they are a great place to go. And one of the reasons that we partner with them is that when they recognize that someone is into territory that they need an attorney, they partner with us for that. They don't provide you attorneys, but they'll do a handoff on that part of the case, part of the situation, and we'll work together. But if you're in that scenario where you're thinking, I want this to stop, but I'm not sure I want criminal charges, you really ought to be talking to an attorney about that at that point, to talk about your options and what would be better based on the circumstances. Because
I think that's
obviously,
absolutely crazy that it was once, I mean, it's far from civil when some seems like an oxymoron there. And I just want to remind those at home that we at Maryland Crime Victims, we only deal with the criminal, so we don't deal with the civil side of the law. So there are other organizations that can possibly assist in a free capacity. Our criminal resources for criminal cases are free to our clients. So Latoya, I wanted to let you, touch on the original question of civil versus criminal.
There's a lag.
Sorry.
There you go.
Did you get me?
Okay. Yeah, I felt like there was some
I wanted you to be able to speak to the civil versus criminal, like why you would go one way versus the other.
Sure. And to dovetail off of what Kurt is saying, literally Maryland law defines a crime as a prohibited action that has a penalty component. And so that's how you get what is a crime, right? And we may have a statute that says you can't do this, but if there is no penalty component, it's literally not considered to be a crime. It may be offensive, but it's not a crime. As far as domestic violence and victims of domestic violence are concerned, in terms of the relief that they can receive, be it civil or criminal, when we say the criminal relief, we're saying that you are asking the state of Maryland to assist you in correcting the behavior, meaning the prohibited conduct, with a penalty, right? And the penalty could be financial. The penalty could be loss of liberty. So someone can go to jail or they can pay a fine. The penalty could also be in terms of someone going to jail, paying a fine. The penalty could be some type of restitution, meaning I have medical bills, I have damages, something that arose from the bad behavior, right? Or the wrongful or the prohibited conduct. That is the criminal avenue. And as far as Maryland Crime Victims Resource, you're correct, we assist when or if a complainant takes that route. Now, I use the word complainant for a reason because, of course, so my criminal defense mind says this: unless someone is, quote, convicted, right, you are a complaining witness. That's what the courts would say. Even though the conduct visited on you is in fact criminal, right, in layman's terms, or offensive, technically, unless someone is convicted, you are technically not considered a victim of crime. As crazy as that may seem, that's just the kind of black and white our system has to be set up with in order to have parameters. But it doesn't mean that you have no ability to get relief. But as far as the criminal relief is concerned, you are asking the state of Maryland to assist you, and through either the Attorney General's office or the local prosecutor's office. So you are considered their witness, and your story, it's what's being put to the public, for the public, the jury, or a judge to determine that you are wronged pursuant to a criminal statute. When we say you also have civil relief, we mean two things. We mean on your own, you can ask the courts to assist you to protect you from future physical harm, financial harm, sexual harm, emotional harm, right? So the civil relief doesn't necessarily mean someone will go to jail as a result of what happened to you. It can, however, mean the court can stop someone's conduct in the future. And that's the quote civil world. Now, the truth is, if an order is put in place to stop someone's conduct from hurting you or your loved one or a vulnerable person, and that, let's say that order is violated, the person can then go to jail. So it's tricky, but the relief that you are seeking, if you are not initially asking someone to go to jail, that's the easiest way to put it, then you're looking at civil relief. Eventually, and let's say you get the civil relief and someone violates that civil protective order, they can then go to jail for violating a court order. So in terms of the civil avenue and the criminal avenue, they can begin in this literally at the same spot, but what the relief that you are seeking or the relief that the courts can provide you will determine whether or not your relief is, quote, civil or criminal. Now, there is kind of another tangential area of relief, and I call it administrative. A lot of times, if you are the victim of domestic violence and the perpetrator has some type of employment that has ramifications that deal with the public, many times you also may have the right to have like administrative relief. I deal with that a lot when I deal with my clients that are victims of police misconduct or government overreach or police brutality. I will also request that the offending law enforcement officer or agent is disciplined administratively. And so you may find yourself having the administrative relief, the civil relief, the criminal relief, and sadly, sometimes it means you're telling your story over and over and over again. And I find that that is traumatic in and of itself. But in terms of how you know whether you're getting civil, criminal, quote, or even administrative, and then there dovetails off of that as well. The question for you should be, what am I really asking for? Because you can get protection, meaning you can have someone stop, you can have them stop from doing what they're doing to you. But is your end goal, I want them to go to jail, right? As an option. Is your end goal, I really need my medical bills taken care of. I need to have my mortgage. I need the person out of my home. I need some type of family relief. I need support from the courts by way of court order, like some type of financial assistance, right? Or am I asking that this person be removed? Let's say, and I have had this, 2 police officers that work for the same agency that are engaged, meaning of course they live at home. One is the victim of domestic violence. There was administrative relief, criminal relief, and civil relief. And of course, civil is also civil lawsuit on top of all of that. So the answer isn't simple, but it's easy to conceptualize if you think, what am I really, what's my end goal? What's my end goal?
So let me see if I understood that correctly and try to break it down just a little bit. Is so civil, your end result is really like a peace order, right? Like it's more like you've got paperwork that says you cannot be here. Is that okay? And
I think that's
criminal
fair.
is
That's fair.
you are paying.
Civil may also allow you.
So criminal is like you are paying, or you are going to jail, or you are somehow going to do more than just stay away from me. Yeah.
Right, you're gonna.
I think that's fair.
In
Okay.
theory, there is jail or prison even, and difference being the local detention center or the Division of Corrections for Maryland. In
Right.
theory, there are money fines, although they are not normally a big issue. There is probation and having to report and being monitored, things of that nature that comes from the criminal aspect. But the civil aspect is a number of other things, as LaToya was saying. One is a protective order, and that is a creature of a
Creature.
Yes, a creature of statute from a number of years ago that makes a quick and easy process to get a court order saying this person is going to leave you alone and this person is going to stay away from you. And I want to take a second to say that as people might expect, when you stop and think about it, that's a piece of paper. And people ask me how effective that is. And I will tell them in 99 cases out of 100, it's very effective. But it is still only a piece of paper. It doesn't mean that the police are going to be stationed outside your door waiting for to see if this person violates the order. But it does mean when you call the police, more often than not, you will get much better, quicker service because they are concerned for your safety when you have a domestic violence protective order.
Right.
It also
And I think
makes
that's the scary part, right? Is that that peace order. We've all seen the movies. Like I don't even need to reiterate what a peace order means and what it might not mean. I think in the long term, just like in a marriage, like it's just a piece of paper. What you do with that piece of paper and what the other person does is a whole nother story. And unfortunately, that's not the black and white part, right? And I think that that's the huge part of being civil versus criminal. And I mean, I think for just, I think everyone involved is just, I mean, people are already kind of acting out of, you know, the ideal. And that's why I always thought it was crazy that it was just like that civil was even an option, because I mean, to me, but domestic violence is such a complex thing, because as you guys were talking about, like, oh, does this person go to jail? Well, what if that person makes money at their job? And what if that person loses their job because you're going criminal? And what if you need help paying for the kids? And what if your car note you can't pay for on your own? And, you know, all these other, it's such a complex thing. And we're not even just talking about, I mean, you know, there is people that are married, there are people that are, you know, living together. There's, you know, so many different things it could be, because domestic violence is also like it can be like grandmother, grandchild, or niece and uncles, or like there's different, right? Domestic violence is all of those things. It's not only those, you know, partnerships, it can be other relationships as well. Where people rely on each other for their well-being, and then, you know, your head goes spinning and people don't know what to do. And I think the guidance is amazing. So I wanted to, you know, we've got
all the more reason that you shouldn't go through this process alone.
Absolutely.
You know, we are sitting here, we are people who deal with this on a regular basis, and you're not expected to know all of these things, because you're walking through life worried about your job and your schooling and your family, and, you know, all of those things. We deal with this on a regular basis because we're professionals, and we're in the field, and we know these things. We know what's available to you. We can talk to you about what's available, and you make your own decisions as to what direction you want to go. But those the tools that are available to you are not necessarily something that everyone would want to use every tool. And that's where working with us, letting us stand by you, and, you know, turnaround doesn't cost you a dime. Maryland Crime Victims Resources Center does not cost you a dime. Some people prefer to get private attorneys, but and that makes sense, by the way, in the circumstance, if you can afford to do it, because there's other things likely coming down the road, particularly when people are married. You're going to end up needing a private attorney, likely, to move forward with a divorce proceeding. If you're not married even and you have children, you're likely to end up needing a private attorney. So it doesn't, and I guess one other situation that I can mention is, you can use Turnaround, you can use Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center, and you can get a private attorney. We work together with private attorneys all the time. So the answer is, there are things that are available that you have to make decisions based on your circumstances. You don't use every tool every time. And sometimes the situation you're in, of course, doesn't, that the tools don't fit you as well as someone who's in a different circumstance. That's just the way it is, and you have to make decisions and choices, just like anything else in life, based on your circumstances.
Thanks, Kurt. No, for sure. And I appreciate you sharing that. And I guess, so we've got 10 minutes left. I wanted to touch really quickly on a question that popped up in my head. Physical versus verbal versus mental. Does it make a difference? Does it how, what, where, when, why? What are we doing? What are the rules? Like, you know, it hasn't come to physical yet, but, you know, maybe some name calling, maybe some, you know, other types of like abuse, is there a case? Is there something they can do? What can we do? I'll start with Lisa.
Yeah, I can't really speak to the legal aspect. I'll leave that to my
pros.
two, right. But I can say that, you know, abuse is abuse. And whether, I mean, like I often say you can't, you know, weigh abuse, what is going to land harder. You know, any sort of abuse is there for a purpose. It's there to reinforce power and control. Often, Sandra, you know, you brought up the fact of not wanting to criminally prosecute an abusive partner because of loss of income. That is yet another reason why they stay. So they're making the decision based on having to be financially stable, which just further reinforces the power that that individual has over them. Like I said, I can't speak for the legal aspect of things, but I can tell you that it doesn't matter what kind of abuse, that it is all abuse, and it runs the same patterns.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So from Latoya, do you want to, let me defer to you. You know, let you go first on this one.
Yeah, you know, I find, I agree with Lisa that trauma is trauma is trauma. And many times we know our circumstance and then we can make a determination on the next best steps to take in terms of stopping the trauma. As far as the law is concerned, the type of trauma that you suffered, whether it is physical abuse or threats of violence, harassment, stalking, the statutes, our statutes, I should say, tell us whether you are eligible for a certain type of relief based on what you've suffered. So it is true that abuse is abuse is abuse, but the statute will define for you, oh, you've suffered this stalking, this harassment, this threats of death, right? Threats to harm you, or we see more often now that we have the social media, you have people that are stalked and harassed and slandered using images of a sexual nature. Those types of things still allow you to get a level of relief. In terms of what to do with it, again, you have the criminal option, meaning the route, you have the civil, you have the administrative. I absolutely agree with Lisa. If you are not subjected to physical abuse, it doesn't mean that you are not suffering trauma and that you were not abused and that you're not a victim of domestic violence. While as an attorney, I believe my job is to advise and to counsel my clients or prospective clients or old clients based on the circumstance that they present to me. But I implore everyone, if you find that you have been alienated and you find that you are ostracized, threatened, harassed, attacked, threatened to be attacked, shamed, this can span from religious in nature to sexual orientation in nature to gender-based to financial-based. If you find that that is your circumstance, you do have an avenue for help. You may not have a criminal relief avenue with every one of those, but you may have a civil, quote, or administrative, be it a divorce, be it a separation, be it an order of protection, protective order or peace order, and you must speak up to take advantage of those different routes. I can't tell you how many stories we hear where we believe people will change for the better with no help. That just is not how human beings work, okay? We are conditioned to do what feels good. And if what feels good is to empower yourself by putting someone else down, someone will continue to do that if they're not stopped. You're not someone's battering ram, but the reality is that gave someone else power. And if they like that, it will not stop. You can't shame people. You can't plead with them to change. You have to really seek help for yourself first, and then for them second, or if it's simultaneously. I tell all women and men, particularly if you're dealing with household violence, like spousal violence, it is not your job, right, to make someone healthy if they are sick. And meaning the sickness is abusing you. You have to protect yourself first. It may not be popular, it may not be easy, particularly if you've never spoken on it before. You may even find that family and friends don't believe you because you've always presented such a rosy picture. And at point of personal privilege, like I'm divorced, okay? And a lot of people will say, oh, I'm so sorry. No, the reality is you make decisions based on your circumstance. If the relationship were working out for you and you were not being abused, then you'd stay in it. But if you are being abused, do not pay attention to what people think. Do not pay attention to the image. Do not pay attention to what you may fear, the unknown, financially, physically, being by yourself, having to take care of the children, having to protect your reputation, protect yourself first. So you have to say something to get this ball rolling. And again, abuse, I agree with Lisa, abuse is abuse is abuse. These matters will in fact escalate if they are not stopped. So I know we're literally wrapping it up, but my prayer to the community is that you recognize that you are being abused and that you stop it by getting yourself help first. Reach out to the Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center, reach out to Turnaround, reach out to private counsel, the commissioner, someone to get yourself out of that situation if you can.
Thank you so much for that, LaToya. I truly, I mean, couldn't have said it better myself. Kurt, last words?
Go back a little bit towards the original premise of this thing, and that is, you know, looking at what is available when there is non-physical violence involved. So what does the statute say about a domestic violence protective order, for example? There are non-violent occasions that you can get a domestic violence protective order. If they are stalking you, you can get a domestic violence protective order. If they are harassing you, and those have specific terms within the law, of course, but essentially, if someone won't stop contacting you on the telephone, if someone is abusive in language to you on the telephone, those things are covered, generally speaking, by harassment. If they are abusive to you in person and you know, refuse to leave you alone, you end up maybe in stalking and maybe in harassment, but you end up somewhere in there. And the domestic violence protective order is available to you for all of those non-physically violent occasions. But those are also crimes that can be pursued for the criminal aspect as well. And that's really what the statute has to say, I believe. I was trying to look it up real quick and I didn't get there to see if I'm leaving anything out of what would be available as protective, domestic violence protective order. But I think it's violence, threats of violence, stalking, and harassment.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys so much for joining us. You know, domestic violence definitely, I think, touches us all, and we're all just so passionate about making sure that people know what their rights are, what they can do. I think the big takeaway is there's help out there for you if you need to get out, if you just need guidance. There are resources available. You know, like LaToya said, you know, I'm divorced. I am divorced, and you know, you have to make decisions for yourself, and then try to start from there, whether it be because of, you know, domestic violence or for whatever reason. You know, there are ways out. Your safety and the safety of your children, if children are involved, are of the utmost importance. So if anyone is out there listening, please, please, please reach out to us, reach out to Turnaround, reach out to organizations, find someone safe. And if we can be of any help, please let us know. You can find us at mdcrimevictims.org. And Seth?
Yes, I actually, So you could reach out to either, so we have an office location in the county and in the city. Our physical address in the city is right downtown at 1 North Charles Street. And if you want to reach out to our 24-hour helpline, that number is 443-279-0379. And that's answered 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kurt, and of course, Latoya, our board member. And, you know, there are plenty of resources out there. Again, we're at mdcrimevictims.org. Our phone number, since I did not include it, is 1-877-VICTIM-1, 1-877-VICTIM-1. Please share this resource to people you don't know who is in need of help, especially on social media. You know, it's all butterflies and unicorns on social media. You never really know what's going on behind the scenes. So you don't know who you're helping by sharing the resource, and let us know if we can be of assistance. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and we will see you next month. All right.